Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 53 of the Say Again podcast with me, Amrita Tripathi. So we're back for season 3, hosting weekly conversations with some incredible thinkers and leaders. And just a note that episodes drop every Friday this season, so you have the full weekend to catch up on some fantastic conversations. Today, I'm beyond delighted to bring onto the podcast Cristina Martinez Pinto. She's the CEO and founder of the Public Interest Technology Lab, the PIT Policy Lab, based out of Mexico and working globally. Cristina, thank you so much. Bienvenidos. Thank you so much for joining us on Say Again.
Thank you for the invitation, Amrita. I'm delighted to be here this morning in Mexico City. It's quite early here.
It's early.
And 53 episodes already. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Cristina, we have met before this podcast was even an idea. So thank you for that validation. I'm so excited when I was doing the research for this to hear all of your accolades. You've won so many awards. You are a responsible AI fellow at Stimson Center. You're, of course, a very talented tech policy entrepreneur, which I knew. But Cristina has also been named on a global list of 100 top women in AI ethics. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Quite the year, right?
Quite a year, quite a ride. And just for our international audiences, Cristina habla español. Yo sé que elle parle français aussi, but for my benefit, we're going to do this interview in English, right? We're going to do it in English.
We can do it in English, and we can perhaps just throw in a few words in Spanish, French, and multilingual stuff.
Yes, and we just make sure we have that full global attention as a result.
Exactly.
And again, thank you for joining first thing in the morning in Mexico. I appreciate it. If you need a coffee break, I'm happy to pause.
It's good. Don't worry.
Right. So you're a tech policy entrepreneur. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about AI ethics. It's a very complicated geopolitical world. And then towards the back half of our chat, I'm going to ask you about your professional journey, like what it means to be a CEO and founder in this day and age. But right now, being a tech policy entrepreneur feels like such a great example of right place, right time. How do you feel about where you are, where the world is? You're operating out of Mexico, but very much globally. You're plugged into what's going on in the US. You were recently in Abu Dhabi for this summit. And it does look like the AI landscape is very clearly demarcated, right? Right now we hear that, the center of gravity is the US and China for core Gen AI capabilities. But as that distills into every industry, do you see that dependence just increasing with time? Or how do you see different countries, different markets, emerging markets trying to, get their seat at the table as well?
I think this is very exciting times. It's not that the topic is new, but it's in all conversation. It has been in all of the news outlets since 2018, the promise of socioeconomic development of AI. And I think we got the opportunity to start seeing it from a very strategic policy perspective and to hop on this wave of countries that were starting to think on how to leverage AI for the public interest. And that's exactly our focus. We focus mainly in the Latin American region, but we also work with a global South lens in understanding what's happening and then how, like the rest of the world, global South countries contribute to this conversation that, as you said, are mostly focused on what's happening in China and the US and somewhat in Europe because of the norms and the European Union Act, because of the approach to regulation and the focus a bit more centered in human rights. I think this year in particularly has shown that a movement that's moving a bit away from this human-centered approach and a bit more into innovation and a bit more into deregulation or self-regulation from companies. So that's exactly the kind of conversations that we're following. And what we're trying to do with this Global South focus is to understand what makes our regions unique, what are our priorities, what are our values, and then how can we stop becoming dependent on just consumers of these technologies and also develop the talent and develop the infrastructure so we can be creators in our own terms. And of course, narrative-wise, this sounds very attractive, but it's very challenging because of the financial constraints, because of path dependencies, and because it's not even, I don't even think it's a competition or a race between countries anymore. It's between companies. Companies right now have more budgets than the countries themselves. So I think geopolitically, that's also something to consider.
You were recently at the first Global AI Summit in Abu Dhabi. And I do want to ask you, when you look at that sort of with that Global South lens, when you look at how, as you said, companies have bigger budgets than countries now, it looks like, access to capital is a huge barrier to entry right now. And as someone very smart was just telling me, like with semiconductors and AI are both going to be critical to the global economy. It's going to be even more so. Did you get a sense from different speakers and folks at that summit or any of your other global engagements on what different regions and markets are doing to kind of mitigate this? Because this is a known factor, a known lever.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the main messages or just like insights that stood out for me was the lack of representation of Latin America. Initially, there was a speaker, of course, from our region, Rebecca Greenspan, but she was representing an international organization on that. So it didn't really echo the voice of the region in terms of saying, where are we at infrastructure development? I think another insight that really stood out for me was the focus first on geopolitics and then on energy and third on infrastructure. And this was really interesting because they thrown in a couple of data that I thought was really important to have in mind before even actually speaking about AI development and deployment. And it was like, we have a world population of 8.1 billion. With electricity, 7.4 billion. Access to internet, 5.5 billion. Basic digital skills, 4.2 billion. AI in own language, 2.7 billion. AI users, 1.2 billion. So this pyramid gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And we cannot be talking about AI for all if we do not work on bridging these gaps. So as an insight, that was, I think, very important. Then also understanding that most of the focus in Global South right now is in the Middle East and in Africa. As Africa has leapfrogged from mobile landlines to all the smartphone era and now is using AI to power public services, they had a few representatives from Nigeria, from Kenya, who were speaking specifically. And there was even a representative from India that was speaking from their experiences in just deploying artificial intelligence for education, for health purposes. So to me, that was very interesting in terms of what kind of projects are flagged, but also the regions that are being put spotlight on. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then also another message that was shared in this first Global AI Summit, I think they're going to try to do it a yearly, or I think it's going to be set as a yearly convening space. I think for a kickoff, the speakers were very high level. We had UN Tech Envoy, Amandeep Singh. We had Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft. It was a summit that was sponsored by Microsoft, the Eurasia Group, G0 Media, and I believe a few other organizations. That also speaks to the fact, and of course the United Arab Emirates, but I think that also speaks to the fact of the role that companies are increasingly playing in setting agendas, in setting the tones of the conversation, but also in working in partnership with governments. And something very interesting that happened is that right after this summit, Microsoft announced the export of chips to the United Arab Emirates. So I think this was all very strategic. And the focus of the message was that we cannot move forward if we don't focus in the 3 T's that they describe as technology, talent, and trust. And it makes sense because technology speaks to infrastructure, talent, to upskilling, reskilling, to workforce development, and trust that you cannot really implement any kind of initiative if you're not also working with the people. And if people do not understand, that also has to do with basic literacy on AI and digital basic skills, speaking to the numbers that I was sharing with you. Yeah. If people are not literate in what's going on around this AI revolution.
Yeah, because that also speaks to, I think, the concerns about the inequities growing. At the same time, when you're talking about the innovation, the potential has always been massive. But, speaking of chips, and this is like, I think just one of the last tough questions for you, because I think that what we didn't really anticipate maybe even 10 years ago, or maybe you did from the policy, the tech policy space, that this dissemination of tech is so tied into geopolitics now, right? It's more complicated with this change in the global world order, which people are saying now there is no world order, right? And we can see all of the conflicts that are going on. But for example, the restriction on the export of AI chips, like it's very dependent on, the kind of the geopolitical forces at play. How do you see that playing out? And how did that, and you just mentioned the Microsoft example with the UAE, that's very strategic. And that's obviously something they decided on or negotiated towards before the summit.
And I think it also speaks to this competition that we're seeing between China and the U.S., trying to access and to gain markets, but also of companies to maintain their I don't want to say their monopoly, but their strategic position in the selling of these goods that are essential for artificial intelligence. And I think there's more to the conversation on geopolitics, because we often think about China and the USA, but when we're speaking about global South, we also have to look at natural resources that are extracted for the production of chips, or even for the development and the running of data centers. We're currently working on a paper on AI and energy, and it explores the tension between AI being a force for sustainability itself, into having more efficiencies in the sector, but at the same time, the impact it has on the environment and how it's growing exponentially in energy consumption. So there's a tension in there, and then there are several recommendations that we think governments can adopt in terms of understanding better the scenarios, the transparency requirements, the possibility of having these public-private partnerships that focus on community development beyond only like incentive tax schemes that are currently like the normal practice. So I think what excites me is that we are in a moment where we are seeing the convergence the intersection of these conversations, and the opportunity to sit at the table with the different actors and to say, okay, so this is currently the norm, but it can work better. And if you really want to focus on the third T, which was trust, you need to be able to compromise, and you need to be able to change. And that's why we're starting to develop a project to work on a data center community engagement framework that meaningfully engages communities in these processes, and that they have a voice and that they have a say in what's happening. So that's why I think the geopolitical aspect is so important, because even though I understand why we focus on China and the US, we also should be seeing strategically where we're getting the resources from. And it's not only natural resources, also people, because we tend to think about future of work like doomsday, like existential risks. But I think there are more important problems in the present that we should be paying attention to, that have to do with data workers protection, with mental health. So to me, I think that is the focus of our hands-on work on beyond documenting positive use cases of AI development. Also, how can we acknowledge the role that global South workforce are playing in the gig economy?
Yeah, because there's this whole conversation around like exploitation of labor again, right? Like sort of that data colonialism. I think reading that Empire of AI by Karen Howe was very illuminating about even what you're talking about data centers and what's happening now, like in terms of resource depletion. Having that as a voice at the table. So when we talk about AI and ethics, and again, to let our viewers and listeners know, Christina was invited to join UNESCO's AI Ethics Experts Without Borders network. You were named, as I was saying earlier, in a global list of 100 top women in AI ethics. That's amazing. Are these the sort of hot button topics? Do you feel like there is now a network of responsible voices? I mean, because I know you were very also passionate about tech for good, right? Like that was one of the earlier things that we'd spoken about. Do you think that these are some of the topics that need to be discussed more, and again, across the board?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's also a need to bring these different communities of practice to the table, because there's, for instance, the Feminist AI Network, which is very active and has amazing work throughout the world, but specifically in Latin America. There's a Woman for Ethical AI from UNESCO that also has like regional chapters, and it's working towards advance women's representation in the space, which again, I encourage your audience to take a look at the 2024 Gender and AI flagship report from One for Ethical AI. I think it's a great read. It provides a lot of data and recommendations on where to focus, on what's next in the conversation, on how to bridge the gap, on bringing women on the AI space in leadership positions. We're currently working, I'm a consultant to UNESCO, and we're working on the 2025 report, which also will be aligned to the readiness assessment methodology that UNESCO has focused on the recommendation on the ethics of AI. So this is another community of practice. As you said, the AI Ethics Experts Without Border community. It's about 100 people from all over the world working on the operationalization of responsible AI, because I think what we've also heard, and it creates noise and confusion, is this idea of principle or of ethereal AI ethics. But what we try to do through our work and within these communities of practices and as practitioners is to have hands-on examples of what it means. So we're seeing it from the standpoint of companies with good practices, and we have an interesting working group on responsible AI that has shared this in the form of reports with Salesforce, IBM, Microsoft, and we can also see it in the form of startups. In Latin America, the IDB worked on an initiative called Fair Lag, and they developed a few checklists and self-assessment guides so that startups could understand better what do we mean by a ethical AI adoption, development, and how that impacts their business models. And specifically in the work that we do at Bit Policy Lab, we work a lot with national and local governments, and the use cases we develop are focused on how we can use open source tools, specifically in the technical space towards mitigation of bias. Specifically, I'm thinking of a project that we had with the government of Guanajuato, but also how we create capacity, ownership, training on the understanding on the leadership teams, on the intersections on AI and human rights, AI and gender, AI and digital activism. So I think it's more comprehensive. It goes beyond the technical work, because I think there's also a tendency to think about AI and only focus on the technology. But to us, it's more about the people and about change management and resistance to change. So if we really want to innovate, if we really want to leverage this technology for good, we have to understand that processes take time and that processes require engaging and working with people. So I think that's the main message that I would like to leave people with, that if anyone's thinking about the ideation, development, or deployment of an artificial intelligence project, it shouldn't only focus in artificial intelligence itself, but more on how you are making sure that your chain of your process change, the people involved in the process that you're trying to impact, is involved and understands why it matters and what is to be solved. Because otherwise the conversation gets focused only on AI and not on the problem that you're trying to solve with AI. And back to the communities of practice and to your question of what's happening and what are the main topics, I think something that we've also seen, as I mentioned briefly before, is there's like these different views on how you approach the issues of existential AI, and you can quickly derail a conversation that should be focused in the present to the future. And of course, I mean, as futurists or as horizon scanners or scenario builders, it's important to think about the future because it's catching up very fast. But on the other hand, if we only focus in the future, we're missing the challenges of the present. And those are those have been documented, are persistent, and are growing. So what I think is missing is a common space so that these communities of practice can meet also with companies, because I think there's a middle space that's void. There's the companies doing their responsible AI work, and there's several communities of practice that do not necessarily want to engage with the companies because of data colonialism, data extractivism, because of just how right now they're not necessarily approaching their work through a data diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. This year has been tough on that. So if we don't bring people in the middle, I think the potential for the scalability of impact are diminished.
Yeah, and that's what you really want to be working towards, right? Like impact that will scale. And I think you've been very articulate about like focusing on the here and now issues as well as, projecting some of the big concerns. I mean, when it comes to sort of the futurists or, everyone who's signing that global letter as well, saying that we don't want, AGI to come or super intelligence to come before we're ready. I think that's been very well documented. So right now, it's interesting to hear you talk about this because I think the conversation has been very either through that sort of economic lens or through a fear lens. It's hard to find that middle ground where you have, people talking to each other or having the right voices in the room, which again comes back to what you were saying about, having that sort of, I guess, the sort of lens of global south as well, because that was one, I think, conversation that really needed to happen. But I do want to ask you how many hours you have in your day. Because it sounds like, I know you're always in different time zones. So I wonder if you're like gaming the 24 hours because you are doing so much. It's amazing. It's incredible. And I'm so glad that you're able to achieve so much. But we're going to come to talking to you about work-life balance at some point in this conversation.
I don't think I used to look for work-life balance, but then I found another concept that was work-life integration, and I liked it better because I always felt that I was failing at the balance, and that I
And I've
wasn't.
heard that it's not possible. That's what most people seem to say. Like, especially founders are like, there's no such thing. Like, you can't.
No, there's not such thing. I think what really is important is to accept the moment in life that you are on and understand what are your priorities, and just be comfortable with saying no. I used to feel that I really had FOMO.
Yeah.
I think the new concept is JOMO, or like joy of
JOMO.
missing out.
Yeah. I love
Joy
it.
of missing out.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love it because I really used to feel that if I didn't say yes to the invitations that I was getting or to travels, I was missing opportunities. Right now, I think saying no, I've been way more strategic in how I manage my time, creates more opportunities. But this has been a learning that I've been developing through the years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't intuitive, or it wasn't something that I just discovered or an aha moment. It was just something that was also a reflection of where I am today, because I have two young daughters, because I founded Pete when I was pregnant of my first daughter, and we've been already running for 5 years. But so my eldest daughter is 5 years and my youngest is 3. So I'm trying to juggle in between. And you saw it this morning with the crying and with the girls getting ready, going to school, and with also teaming up with my partner so that we can both excel at what we do, but manage at home. I think this topic of the mental load is very real, because even when we have very, very equal, supportive partners, the mental load never leaves us. I'm thinking about everything, about the school, about my kid's birthday party, and about the project, and about my home, and about the trip that I'm having next week. So I think the day has 24 hours because my mind never rests.
Yeah.
And I don't say this as a source of pride. It's something that I've been trying to work on and to understand better, because it's taking a toll at my physical and at my mental health. And again, I think between my 20s and my 30s, I was a very say yes to everything person, and trying to cover as much as possible and to live as many experiences. But now in my 30s to 40s, I'm trying to be very, very conscious on the activities that I'm picking, on the time I spend, on the quality time that I spend with my family, on the trips that I do that I think add value to the work that we do, and to my understanding on why we do what we do and how we can do it better and how we can connect the dots.
Yeah.
And also, I think I've been more conscious on the importance of also having time for myself.
Yes.
Because when you're lost in all the juggling, I think you put yourself
last. Yeah.
And as I said, this in May, I was in the hospital for a week, and it really took a toll on my physical health.
I'm so sorry.
It's been challenging even to go back to my previous levels of wellness and fitness. It's just complicated. And mental health, I've been struggling a lot with it, and I'm open about speaking about it because I feel that it's also a taboo, and for many leaders, because I was diagnosed in January with depression, and I started taking the medicine for it.
Okay.
And I started feeling much more better, but I didn't understand what was happening before. And I didn't really connect what was happening with depression, because to me, a person with depression was someone that was sleeping, that was sad, that was like not getting up from the bed. And I was not that. I was super active, very efficient, but I was feeling very disconnected from the work that I was doing. I was feeling very frustrated. I was feeling very anxious. And I didn't know that was also a form of depression. So understanding better where all of this is coming from and how I can manage better, I think helps me better just accept who I am right now, and also let go of the person that I was before, because it's also a thing that I've been struggling with, right? Being like this entrepreneur and this person that loved traveling and that loved being part of international conversation. Well, right now, in the moment of life that I am as a mom, that's something that I have to cut off.
Yeah.
Or to, of course, not to disappear, but my identity has changed. And just, I think this year has been all about being at ease with my new identity, embracing it and taking one day at a time. Because I also think this mental health, physical health conversation inserts itself with the context of what's happening internationally. And to be honest, this year has been very, very harsh on people working not only in NGOs, but also in international cooperation or in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
I think, you can share your own experience, but
I think that, and of course, the people in the conflict zones, like it's been a terrible couple of years. But thank you for sharing that. I feel, because we do some work on the mental health awareness front through the Health Collective, and I really appreciate your sharing. I think everyone who's, heard someone going through something, it really helps them also come to terms sometimes, because there's still so much taboo. And I will say you're ahead of the curve, because I'm in my mid 40s, and this year I was telling everyone very proudly, like, I've learned to say no. Like, I'm still learning to say no, and take time out for, like, me time. I think self-care has become an industry, but it's actually so important to, as you said, figure out what is your identity. So with, for me, as I was looking at, the startup not working, like Tap In Tribe, as the way it was set out to work on women in leadership, with a couple of years ago when we spoke was like, oh, it's amazing. And this is what we need. We need more, collaboration. And then you realize, oh my God, DEI budgets have dried up. What does that mean for your business? Coming to terms with like success in one way and failure in another. And can you pivot? But what I was really fascinated by also, Christina, based on what you just said, is there are so many startup founders who are actually struggling with mental health issues, because it's just always on. The pressure is always on. I mean, I think it's something that affects everyone. Like, we all have mental health and people struggle, but founders have a very, very specific set of pressures on them. So I would love to ask you a little bit about, as you're coming to terms with, your identity apart from the sort of the work identity. I think for women, it's also really interesting to be like, you have multiple identities. It's not just your professional. But for so many years, we think of it only as like, oh, what's my designation, right? Like, that's who I am. Has your definition then changed of success and failure, and how you kind of evaluate yourself, how you look at where you want to be next year? Or you look at it, I mean, we've got 6 weeks left in this year, but how you look at success and failure and your own approach?
Yes, I think my approach to success and failure has changed a lot throughout this year, because I used to, and you just hit a very important point that resonated with me. I think my identity was based on my work throughout all my professional career. I worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I had the opportunity to work at the World Bank, and then to work at Siemens, to be a founder at the Pit Policy Lab. So it was always about what was I doing, right? And being very successful in this space. And then as I had GenZ workers, at first it was very unsettling. Like, I didn't understand like why they were like severance, right? Like they had such
Yeah.
different personalities at home and at work.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, I was like, I don't really understand it. But now I think it's great because their identity is not defined by what they do. I think that's perhaps something generational, with more related to our generation. And I used to also have all these milestones, and I reached them. And I think I'm very persistent and I'm very disciplined. So I reached every single milestone that I had. But it came a point where I started questioning myself, like, what for and what's next? Or who or why am I doing this? Is it about the impact? Is it about my ego? Is it about, like, what exactly is happening here? So, and I was also comparing myself to people I've met throughout my life, and thinking like, oh, see, this person is doing this person is doing that, and where am I? And throughout this year that I've been working a lot in my mental health with the psychiatric and psychologist, both like a double team, I think I've tried to let go a lot of these preconceived ideas and just conceptions I had about myself and about success or about failure, and just taking it more as learnings, right? This year, with the closing of USAID, we've lost an important contract that we had, and that changed everything in terms of how we kicked off the year with Bit Policy Lab, but also the whole ecosystem sort of like put themselves on standby, the international development financing ecosystem. And that put a lot of pressure and questioning on what's next, right? And if I'm brutally honest, like this year, for instance, we just went through a round where we developed 6 project proposals, and the 6 of them got rejected. And that had never happened before. Before, it used to be from 6, maybe 4 got approved, because they were really, really good proposals. And this is just a signal that I think the space is crowded. There are a lot of amazing proposals. The financing is diminishing. And I just take it as a sign of keep on going, but keep on going, understanding I'm very, even when all of this could signal to a bad year coming ahead, I'm optimistic that 2026 will be a much better year, because we are planning, because this year we've been preparing for it to be.
Yeah.
I think it just got us, it was a bit of a surprise for everyone, all this realignment. And every year, as I had said also before, has its own thing. And we went through a global pandemic, but this one in particular for a space, I think has been brutal.
It's been.
And as a person, also like dealing with that in a sense of a leadership position where people are looking at you to coordinate, to articulate, it also puts a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And this is not about the ego, not because I want to demonstrate anything, but because I feel a responsibility, because I've had so many opportunities, and I get to be in these very small decision-making places that I feel that I have to give back, and I have to deliver. So that's why I'm hoping for 2026 to be a much better year, where we can really elevate other organizations in the region's work, where we can really articulate what we're doing. I think we're also not trying to reinvent a new wheel. There are many amazing organizations throughout the Global South, many activists, many reporters working on these issues from very innovative angles. So to me, right now, my focus is a bit more on how do we elevate everyone's work? How do we come together, create consortiums so that we can exponentiate what's available and we can multiply the funding available?
Yeah.
But that's just like the idea of what we're working right now, and personally how I'm seeing it. And also I'm trying to enjoy myself more. I think I realized that things that used to keep me awake in the night are not impacting me anymore. I'm sleeping very well. I'm sleeping more. Like I'm just, because I understand, like if I am not well rested, I cannot do anything. Like so I'm trying to prioritize that.
I'm so happy to hear that, because I feel like that was also been a late realization for me. Like I think the last couple of years, to be like, wow, if you're not in good health, and I think, you know, physical, emotional, mental, all of it, there's no point. Like it doesn't matter how much you've achieved. It doesn't matter how many, you know, milestones you hit. And it's such a wake up call, right? In a way, like you just realize what you just said, like to be more mindful, to lean into the JOMO rather than the FOMO, I think. Just a couple more questions for you. And Christina, I have to say, like we do have to give a shout out to our leadership and tech, Virginia Tech founding cohort. That's where I first met Christina a few years ago. And I really loved how in all of those incredible interactions we had, because we had the privilege of meeting so many different people from different industries, like working in different facets of tech, you always were really like, you were like leaned in. You were like, I have questions. I want to, like, I've been listening. Like, you're a very active listener. I love that about you. As a leader yourself, like, how important do you think it is to index on empathy? Because for me, I've always been like, yeah, you have to be a very empathetic leader. And it was an interview I did with someone. And for me, the aha moment was like, oh, wait, you have to also be very, very good at what you do. Like, you need the results. Like, you can't be like so empathetic that, you let people not work. It's tough. It's a tough line. So how do you look at, and who are some of the people who inspire you? How do you look at leadership, and where do you index on empathy?
Yeah, I think just to say, and also to add on your shout out to the Virginia Tech program, because I think that was an experience that really, like a foundational experience, that kind of experience that really make you think about your moment in life and about what's coming next. And it also made me realize, like, to own the superpower of humanities, because I've always felt a bit of an outcast and a bit of like that I was taking someone else's seat, because I was coming from the humanities world. I have a background in international relations and in public policy. So I always felt that I was questioned, that I had to like present my credentials in a table to justify why I was sitting there without having a technical background and participating in these AI conversations. But I think this program made me realize that humanities are a superpower, that our perspective is very unique. I really love the model on stories make the world around, because I do really think narratives are essential to building movements, to creating momentum, to creating a community. So yeah, I really acknowledge Virginia Tech, not only for the program itself, but also, of course, for connecting me to amazing individuals. I think our cohort was exceptional. I truly enjoy our final day of presentation. That was so much fun, so innovative, so refreshing. And right now I'm in awe looking at everyone's work in the US or outside India, Ireland, and to see everyone succeeding in their own terms. So back to the empathy question, something that I realized, and this was a very early, it happened only actually a few weeks ago while again in therapy, is an insight about how you also have to rein empathy. Like how you cannot let empathy dominate yourself, because then it leaves you at a very vulnerable place where you are not able to act, or where it affects you. And I connected it to an experience that happened to me as a leader, where again I was trying to be very, very, how to say, just I was trying to be very understandable with the team, and to have a very clear boundary between the personal life and the work life balance or integration. But I remember a few times there were some issues that my team had that I didn't know how to handle. And that in light of not knowing how to handle that, I ended up taking the work on me, and that ended up having a toll on myself. So that's why I think, and that's why I connected it to the understand what are the limits of empathy, because then as a leader, you're not necessarily leading, you're just taking over everything. And I think leadership also has to do with accountability from you and from the team members.
So how do you, have you found the way to balance that out? Like, you can be an empathetic leader with those boundaries and accountability.
Yeah, I think right now, to be an empathetic leader, I think it also speaks to the fact that I used to think of leadership with a focus in myself, right? On becoming a better leader, on having all these credentials, on doing all these programs, on having, and again, having the justification to say, well, I am a leader, but that's not necessarily leadership. I think I've completely changed the focus more as in, okay, how can I be a platform for others? How can I support others wherever, like in terms of projects or in terms of personal mentorship, in understanding and listening, like implementing their recommendations in processes, if it's about team leadership development, but also if it's about forming partnerships, then how can we bring different perspectives and voices and make sure it's meaningful? Because I think right now, like these co-creation processes are also under the spotlight because it's very challenging to bring very different perspectives together and then to get things done.
To get things done, yeah, geez, that's the thing, right? Like you still have to focus on the deliverable or the outcome, you
Exactly.
know?
And then how do you create meaningful connections where you're not
Yeah.
just inviting someone to speak for 1 minute and then say, okay, so you were here,
Thanks. Yeah, yeah,
this is
yeah,
inclusive, because I see
yeah,
this happening over and over and over, and even in events that the formats are very like one way, are
yeah,
just like a traditional classroom setup, are not
yeah.
necessarily engaging in conversation. And I think as part of my leadership approach, we're also trying to innovate in how we deliver uh, programs, in how
Mm-hmm.
we facilitate workshops, in how we engage conversations, in how we make sure that everyone has a meaningful experience.
Mm.
So I think that also speaks to, I don't know if a new or a different form of
A different
leadership
approach.
where it's
Yeah,
a bit more distributed, where
yeah,
my leadership depends on others also having a voice and also
yeah,
being part of it, enjoying it, having fun. I think having fun is also really, really important to make sure that things stick and
yeah,
that connections are real and that
yeah,
we then have the trust as a group
yeah,
to move forward and also understanding that I don't have to do everything. It doesn't have to come, the ideas, the leadership doesn't have to come from me. I tend to take the lead and I tend to ask the questions because I'm used to it, but I don't think I should be doing it because perhaps me jumping in prevents others from doing it. So I'm also being very conscious about that, to let others have their own learning path to leadership in the ways they define it, because also my definition of success or where I am in life might be inspirational for some, but for some others will be like, wow, that's amazing, but that's not something I would like to do, and
yeah,
that's good.
yeah.
So
I love
I'm
that.
on that right now.
I love this. My money's on you. I think you're just amazing. I think you've been juggling different identities and different approaches and synthesizing and making it your own. So fingers crossed for 2026.
Yeah,
Just final words from you in terms, because of just the time. I could keep
yeah,
chatting with you
sure.
forever, as you know. Final words for you on it's something that you might want to share that you're grateful for. So we like to wind down with gratitude sometimes.
Perfect. And let me tell you, because I remember the second part of the question. So some of the leaders that I admire is right now at a global scale, Gabriela Ramos. She's been very inspirational because she led all of UNESCO's work on the ethics of AI. And she did it from a place where UNESCO had no role in AI at all. And she built a practice and the first recommendation on the ethics of AI. And she convened people from all over the world, co-created the Women for Ethical AI Network. So, and then had an amazing campaign to run for UNESCO. Unfortunately, she retired from it. But I think she would have been an amazing leader. And I think she was also very graceful in the way she retired and in conceding to the process and to the organization. So she didn't make it about herself. It was all about the organization and a work plan and a vision. So that to me was very and is very inspirational. And I think another public figure that I really admire, and it's very close to home as well, and I have it here, is my husband's um, mm, uh, uh, I think it's not at all what you expect of a grandmother, which is why her story is so fascinating. She was the first woman on so many different fronts, as a diplomat, as an economist, as a politician, as a legislator. She passed away last year at 99 years old as Mexico's president of the Chamber of Deputies, and she handed the presidential band to the first female president in Mexico. So to me,
Wow.
To me, that was a very like amazing moment to see a woman heading one of the powers, giving the presidential band to the first female president. And I think her story, because she was born in 1925, so she went through all these historic phases, and she was just like this one of a kind person, so brilliant. And also to get to see her as the bisabuela, how do you say, like great grandmother of my
Your children?
girls, of my children, of my female,
Yeah.
of my girls, was just to me as so important as to say, look, this is your
Yeah.
great grandmother. Of
It's
course, you can
amazing.
do and be whoever you want.
Anything. Yeah.
So yeah, that was very inspirational. And in terms of gratitude, I am very thankful, and Thanksgiving is coming too. So I think I'm very thankful for my family. I'm thankful for the opportunities I've had. And I know, and I have a sense of responsibility of giving back. I know I've been very, very privileged, and that I've worked hard for the milestones I've reached, but that the doors have also opened because of the privilege that I've had. So I acknowledge that, and I see it as of course something to be thankful for, but beyond thankful, something that makes me responsible to give back to the community. I'm thankful for my friends, for my female friends. I think these past few years, just exploring female leadership, female networks, sorority has been huge on my life, being part of the Feminist AI network. So I'm really thankful for those females that are inspiring me, female entrepreneurs, mothers, like those role models that I see. I'm like, wow, they're amazing and they're authentic.
Yeah.
And they are a source of power. And of course, for my mother, for my sister, for my dad, for my brother, my husband, my girls, so many things. And of course, I think I'm thankful for being alive in this era, because I think each era has its own things. But I'm looking forward to perhaps doing in 2050 and to look back and say, wow, remember the beginning where we were speaking of AI governance.
On AI governance.
Yeah, so I'm thankful of the opportunities of my era, and for being Mexican too.
Aw, I
And this
love
is
that.
and this is something that Guillermo del Toro always speaks about, why being Mexican is so special to him. But I do think that Mexico is a beautiful country with a beautiful culture, with amazing people, amazing food. And I think that gives us a lot of pride in our identity. And I think it also opens a lot of doors in the rest of the world on how we're seen.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful for being Latin American and Mexican.
Yes. And I think we need to make a trip that side. For my viewers and audiences, I think we need to do a Mexico-India crossover. We can swap. There's so many.
I'm hoping to come to the India AI Summit in February.
Amazing. In
So we
February.
can continue our conversation there.
Yes, that would be fantastic. Well, I'm very grateful for you for taking out so much time and being so authentic and having so many important topics that you brought up today, and also just for being the role model that you are, Christina. Thank you so much for taking out the time.
No, thank you for this invitation. And again, congratulations for this space. I think it's very important for us to have the opportunity to be more ourselves and not necessarily thought leaders only, to be more personal.
Yeah, I love it.
So thank you about that
Thank you.
too.